Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I'm talking about the book The Woman Who Fooled the World by Bo Donnelly and Nick Toscano, published in 2017, and I am comparing it with the TV show adaptation. It is currently streaming on Netflix. It is titled Apple Cider Vinegar and was created by Samantha Strauss. And so both book and movie document the life of wellness guru Belle Gibson, who had a large social media following where she pretended to be suffering from cancer, but she was keeping the disease under control using self-care therapies. However, she was eventually found out and she confessed that it was all a lie. And my quick spoiler-free thoughts on both book and TV show: I loved them both and I would highly recommend each of them. The book was very well researched, well written. I could not put it down. The story, like Belle Gibson, the lie she is living, it's also so frustrating, and it's like watching a train wreck and yet you can't look away. But then also, while focusing on Belle Gibson, we also get these other stories that veer off from her. And so we're hearing about these other people who are also dealing with cancer, and then just so many other interesting topics that, again, that veer off from this main story of Belle Gibson. And so both book and TV show just give you so much to think about, and I felt like I was learning so much while reading the book as well. And the TV show, I thought it had great pacing, great performances, and I just loved how they captured these characters in an honest light. And yeah, I just thought both were very well done. I had never heard of Belle Gibson before this, but yeah, I would recommend each of them. And from here on out, it is time to get into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So even though, again, this is primarily about Belle Gibson, by the way, she did not make any money from the book or the TV show. The TV show makes sure to say this at the start of every episode. But yeah, anyway, so even though this is about Belle Gibson, we can't talk about Belle without talking about the other main character of this TV show, a woman named Milla. And she is based on the real life person, Jess Ainscough, though throughout this video, I will probably be calling her Milla most of the time. But she is a woman who truly was diagnosed with cancer and who claimed that natural remedies cured her. And so this is where Belle got the idea. And I really loved how much the show focuses on Milla, and I found her storyline very compelling. And one reason why she's maybe more compelling than Belle is because she's more complicated, right? Like, Belle is just a straight up liar, whereas Milla, Jess Ainscough, she was telling the truth to some extent. We'll get into it, but she thought she really was doing a good thing in some ways. And so just, yeah, I was very invested in her story in the TV show because the show focuses on her even more than the book did. And yeah, I think that was a smart choice. And I really liked anything involving her character. And the show does stay close to the true story of Jess Ainscough. So like I said, she really did have a cancer diagnosis. It was in her arm, but rather than have it amputated like the doctors wanted, she chose to find a natural cure. And so she read about the Gerson therapy, which is called the Hirsch therapy in the TV show. But this claims that a juice diet, a positive attitude, and clean eating and a lot of coffee enemas can cure cancer. And they had a facility in Mexico, which she attends, and she does get better for a time. And I also wanted to say how much I loved the way the show portrays the woman who runs this clinic. She is clearly just such a scammer and a horrible person who is only out for the money that can be had when you promise a magical cure to desperate, dying people. And the real life woman passed away in 2019 at the ripe old age of 96 after spending her life taking advantage of vulnerable, sick people. But Milla, after seeming to be better after doing this treatment, she turns her experience into a lucrative business with a popular social media account, a website, and a book. However, her own mother eventually gets cancer, and the mother follows Milla's example by not doing the conventional treatment, and she ends up dying. And then, meanwhile, Milla's own cancer has returned, and in the show, when she goes to see a real doctor, they tell her that she waited too long and the cancer, it's gone too far and it's too late for treatment, and so Milla passes away soon after. Whereas in real life, she did start doing radiation treatment near the end, but I guess we can assume that, like the TV show, the cancer was too far along at that point, and so the radiation treatment didn't work, and she still passed away at the age of 29. And so her story is so heartbreaking because on one hand, at the start, she thought she really did cure herself doing these natural remedies, this holistic wellness treatment, juicing, and coffee enema option. And so she thought she was doing a good thing by telling her story and encouraging others to go the same route she did. But then eventually when the cancer comes back, at that point, she was lying to people, right? Claiming it could cure you when it couldn't because the cancer returned. And I also liked how in the TV show we see how this whole experience, how it affects her family, because she totally is on the holistic end of things, whereas her dad wants them to do the traditional medical, what the real doctors say. And then the mom seems to kind of be caught in between. And ultimately, she sides with Milla and she goes with her to the Hirsch treatment center. And then when the mother gets cancer in the TV show, we get a scene where the husband is begging her, like, go to the hospital and do the chemotherapy treatment. However, the mom is committed to going to the Hirsch center because she tells him, like, what kind of a mother would I be to have encouraged my daughter to go the holistic route, and yet I myself don't, right? And so she felt like she would be a hypocrite if she didn't also do the same treatment that her daughter did. And Milla's end in the show is very emotional as she reveals to her father that the cancer has returned, and seeing their pain as they hear that she can no longer get treatment is just so heartbreaking. And then the poor father, right? Because he lost his wife and his daughter back to back, both from cancer. And it's also like preventable cancer, especially with Jess Ainscough, because if she had her arm amputated, we can assume she would have been okay. And so, yeah, it's complicated and it's really heartbreaking and sad. And in both the TV show and in real life, Belle did have interactions with Jess Ainscough / Milla. However, they were brief interactions, and Milla never vibed with Belle, and so they never became friends. They barely knew each other in real life. However, that did not stop Belle from claiming that Milla had been a close friend and mentor. And like I said, Milla's story is what inspired Belle to tell her own lie. She was always a compulsive liar. But Milla's story is what inspires Belle to start telling people that she also cured herself with these natural remedies. However, she has bigger dreams than Milla does, because she has the very smart idea to turn this into an app. And so this is an app that focuses on all of these natural wellness recipes to help cure you of diseases, essentially. And the app skyrockets, and she is handpicked by Apple to have her app be one of the few that is going to be featured on their new Apple Watch. And this adds another interesting layer to the conversation, because Apple did not look into whether Belle was even telling the truth. Her app was still a great idea for wellness and healthy recipes and everything, and it looked beautiful. But what really sold it was her saying that this is how I cured my cancer, right? It would not have done as well as it did had she not attached that story to it. And so, yeah, the fact that Apple did not check to see if this was even true. And then also the company that published her cookbook, they also didn't ask for actual medical records and get proof, However, it's a bit more complex with the publishing house, because prior to the launch of her book, they did a test interview where they asked her a lot of hard-hitting questions that they were saying, you're going to have to deal with this when you're on tour for your book, so we need to practice this and prep you for the kind of answers you need to give. And based on how this interview went, because they had recorded it, you can tell, based on the questions and the way Belle answers them, it's so obvious that she was full of crap. And so the woman at the publishing company, she either just saw dollar signs like Apple did and didn't care that she was clearly lying, or maybe at that point she felt like things were too far along and it was too late to pull the book. But needless to say, in real life, this woman was fired. And then Belle also was claiming to be giving thousands of dollars to charities. So she claimed she gave a lot of money to a boy who had cancer, to his family, but then also just all of these different organizations. She said that she was doing these fundraisers, but she also said that a certain percentage of the money they made from the whole pantry, she claimed that certain percentages were given to different charities. However, she never donated anything until reporters came after her, and they sent her an email, and that very day she sent $1,000 to one of the charities. That way she could say that at least that donation was legitimate. And when one of Belle's close friends came forward to the reporters telling the story, she told them of Belle faking cancer and she wanted them to reveal the truth of that. However, the reporters knew that that wouldn't really fly and you can't just print stories making seemingly outlandish accusations about someone's health. And so right off the bat in real life, they instead focused on the charity aspect. And once the article was published saying that Belle lied about donating money, it didn't take long for the public to start wondering what else she lied about and speculating on whether or not the cancer was even real. Whereas in the show, it seems like they pursue the cancer angle for a while before eventually pivoting to the charity fraud. And the boy she claimed to be raising money for is in both book and show. And in real life, his name was Joshua, and the TV show they call him Hunter. But we see how she uses this quote-unquote friendship for her own personal gain. And she also fakes her own seizure after seeing Hunter experience it. And so the fake seizure, which happens at her son's birthday party, that's in real life as well as in the TV show. But in the TV show, we see how she had seen Hunter have this seizure. And so we see how she got inspired to do this, right? And so again, just how horrible and manipulative she was being. And it was at her son's own birthday party. So her son saw her having a seizure. He thought his mom was dying. So anyway, just terrible all the way around. And in real life, so totally unrelated to Belle, this family, Joshua's family, they got money from the community because the community did a fundraiser to help him out. However, over time, Joshua, he kept living. And so the community started to speculate, like, did he even have cancer? Because they made it seem like it was terminal and he was going to die soon, but he's still around. And so people in the community confronted the parents asking, like, wanting proof of his cancer. And one of the people who confronted them, the parents were like, what do you want from us? And they said, well, a funeral would be a good start, which of course, they were telling the truth. He really did have cancer. And so to have people like giving you, like being so kind and charitable and giving you money only to then come at them and be angry that the son didn't die when he was supposed to, like, what a horrible thing to experience, right? And Joshua in real life, he did end up dying in 2017 at age 9. But when reporters talk to Joshua's parents in real life, asking them like about their relationship with Belle, the parents stand up for Belle because they're like, hey, take it easy on her because we know what it's like to truly have cancer and have people come at you claiming you're lying and just what a horrible experience it is. And so the people who stood up for Belle initially, when they wanted to believe the best of her, just seeing how she betrayed so many people, right? Like these parents of a boy who really did have cancer, they experienced what this was actually like. And so they wanted to believe the truth of Belle. And anyway, just so much betrayal. And it was just horrible. Whereas in the TV show, we do get people confronting Hunter's parents asking, like, does he even have cancer? And we get the funeral line here as well. However, in the TV show, it seems that people become suspicious once the truth of Belle is revealed because she had claimed to give them $60,000 for a surgery and they never received a cent of that. And so once it's revealed that Belle lied about cancer, people then confront Hunter and his family wanting to know whether or not they lied too, which of course they hadn't. And then along with Josh/Hunter, both book and TV show also feature other cancer patients. So the book, we get 2 women, one named Monique, one named Kate, both of whom have cancer, who the authors interview. And then in the TV show, we just get one woman and her name is Lucy. And she is primarily a version of Kate because both Kate and Lucy have breast cancer and she views Belle as an inspiration. And she also met Belle because Kate/Lucy worked at a cafe where Belle would go to. And so she is one of the people who truly had cancer and looked up to Belle and thought she was just such an incredible person. And so we see how Belle's fraud and her lying, how it impacts someone like Lucy's. Someone who saw Belle as a symbol of hope for themselves. And then also the TV show has Lucy's husband be one of the reporters who exposes Belle. And this was not the case in real life, but for the sake of the story, I thought this was a cool addition for the TV show. And then to talk about Monique, so she is a really important part of the book because she is a woman who truly does have brain cancer, which is the type of cancer that Belle claimed she had. And so it is just like a stark juxtaposition to see Belle her life that she is leading compared to the reality of what it's actually like to have this diagnosis. And we hear in the book that brain cancer has a very low survival rate because it is on part of the body that can't be operated on, right? Like you can't remove part of the brain and take the cancer out. And so again, I think it was so important to include this woman's story because it just really hammers home what a horrible thing Belle was doing by, she was prancing around the world being this awesome entrepreneur who was the picture of health. And she would claim like, oh, I'm in constant pain and I have to work so hard to appear healthy. And she is just trivializing those who truly do have brain cancer and basically implying that like you too could look healthy and happy if you just put in the work. And the sections that follow Kate and Monique, like they were just so heart-wrenching, but the authors did a good job at writing about them in a respectful way, and it did not feel at all like they were exploiting their pain. And I thought the show also did a great job with the scenes involving Lucy. And at one point in the show, we see Lucy at a retreat that claims to be helping her with her diagnosis, and we see that she has a positive drug trip, and so she then pays more to stay for another week and to meet this quote-unquote doctor who will be coming by. And I thought Lucy would end up dying while she was away at this treatment camp, but we do end up seeing her return home and she is with her husband. But the reason I thought that she was going to end up dying there is because this is another part of the story that is delved into the book specifically, because Gerson therapy is not the only scamming cancer treatment centers out there. Like there are so many people out there providing hope for those with cancer when they don't actually have a cure to offer. And in the book, there's a part where they interview a doctor who is a fairly well-known oncologist at the hospital he works at. And he's also like the director of clinical trials. And so he's a very well-respected doctor when it comes to cancer. And there is a part when he talks about the importance of accepting death rather than looking for a miracle cure. And we read, the conversations about no more treatment is a really tough conversation, Mark says. There should be an acceptance and a recognition that someone is dying. It's a special time. Not an easy time, but a special time. It can be a profound time. Things are said that need to be said. Things are done. Patients resolve matters, plan for their family, and settle their affairs. And I think with a lot of these treatments, you might go overseas, you might try certain things, spend a lot of money, put in a lot of effort, and you lose time. The time that should have been spent holding hands, talking, and comforting each other. That's lost. And so while it's heartbreaking to think of these people spending their last moments away from their families in these treatment centers that are just scams, and yet at the same time, you can also understand why they do this, right? Like why they don't want to accept that they're dying and they're looking for another answer, right? And so you can't blame them either. And the book and the TV show also really get into this aspect of the story of how women in particular are especially susceptible to this idea of holistic healing, and they fall for the classic snake oil salesman. And the scene in the show when Milla gets the black salve is just a prime example of this. But this aspect made me think of the book Delicate Condition, which also talks about this. And I wanted to share a quote from that book, which relates to this theme. So by the way, just some backstory. Delicate Condition is about a woman who is pregnant, but the doctors are just very dismissive of her pains and her issues, and they think she's being hysterical and being overdramatic, and just how women are treated by the medical industry, and they aren't taken it seriously oftentimes. And so then in the afterword, the author says, "Is it really any surprise then that women look for answers elsewhere? Faith in alternative and homeopathic medicines such as acupuncture and aromatherapy is at an all-time high, particularly among women. And while such remedies can in many cases be beneficial, we're not always so lucky. Women are more likely to be drawn in by dangerous MLM schemes like selling essential oils that claim to cure everything, from weight gain to eczema to cancer. And women and mothers have been leaders in the anti-vaccination movement, a movement that puts children and unvaccinated adults in danger. These things are not harmless, and they don't just affect women. But when the blowback comes, women are often the ones blamed. Silly women believing snake oil salesmen and ignorant women who don't understand how vaccinations work. People conveniently forgot the medical system that abandoned them." And so again, I think rather than just, like that quote says, rather than just being like, oh, like women, they're so gullible, they want to believe in these natural cures when it's so ridiculous. Again, maybe think of why is it so common for women to believe this? And maybe sometimes it's because of the medical industry and and how they are dismissed and not validated by these medical professionals. But I also need to talk about the character of Chanelle. So there really was this person in real life, and the story of her making the meals for Hunter's family, which Belle kept for herself, is true, and she did confront Belle, asking her to tell her the truth. But in real life, she was also there with another friend, so it wasn't just one person trying to stage an intervention on Belle, it was two of them. And then it is also this woman, though, who eventually goes to the reporters. And in the TV show, we see that she had been friends with Milla, and then she meets Belle at this event, and then she becomes caught up in Belle's life. However, this was not true of the real person. She was not affiliated with Jess Ainscough. And we also get a scene in the show where Chanelle meets the doctor that Belle uses. However, it was a different friend that met this doctor. So in some ways, the TV show just kind of combines Chanelle. She's just a combination of various different people who had known Belle. But we see, though, that she is a smart, good person. And so the fact that she is swept up in the lie that is Belle's life shows how manipulative and how believable she was. And also, most people probably didn't even think to doubt the cancer claim, because that is just something that's just way too serious. Like, why would someone lie about that, right? And so it took some time for her to be piecing things together and realize that this was not adding up. And then Clive, so he is the man Belle begins to date, who is about 20 years older than her. And he speculates fairly early on that she is lying, but he seems like he was a mild-mannered guy and one that Belle was easily able to manipulate and control. But also, he did truly love her son that she had with her former deadbeat boyfriend. And so his love for this boy, Oliver, is also what kept him around for so long, because if they got separated, he would not have any parental rights, right? Because Oliver was not his son. And so if he left Belle, he would also be leaving Oliver. And we see in the show when things with Belle, when it's getting out of control, Clive talks to the birth father of Oliver to try to get him to have full custody. But again, this guy is a deadbeat and has no interest in caring for Oliver. And so Clive is really the only person who is a good parent to this boy. And so again, you can just see why he stuck around. And also, they did try to have their own child, Belle and Clive. However, she had a miscarriage. And this was a very painful scene to watch. And it's one of those moments where you do start to feel for Belle. However, anytime you start to feel bad for her, it doesn't last long, because then she reveals her true colors and she lashes out and she's just rude and petty and manipulative. And so, yeah. Pity you feel for her doesn't last very long, including this miscarriage scene. And she also just uses this later on to add to her sob story in order to get more attention. And what Clive and Belle's relationship was like as time went on, we can't really say. By the end of the book and the TV show, they are still together. However, there were people who claimed that their relationship was not romantic in any way, and they lived together, but they weren't like in a relationship necessarily. Meaning, like, as time went on, they stopped being romantically involved despite living together. Because obviously, initially, they were romantically involved. And then also there was an article that said in 2023, Clive was seen with another woman, showing that he was no longer with Belle. But again, he was always mild-mannered and shy and private. And so he is not someone who is flaunting what is going on in his life. And that's his right. You know, like, it's not, we have no right to be snooping into his life, and he doesn't owe us any kind of explanation. And so we don't really know what's going on with him. And that's okay, because it's his choice. And Oliver, by the way, Belle's son, he was born in 2010. So he is now like 15 years old. And so I feel bad for him, because I'm sure he knows about this Netflix show that's out. And also, not only that, like, your mom having this negative fame, this infamy, but also like to be raised by a woman like that too. Like, I just feel bad for Oliver. And speaking of parents, so in the show, we see that Belle's mom is also a bad parent and doesn't care about Belle. And again, we get moments where we feel bad for Belle because we see the relationship dynamic between the two of them, and how, you know, her mom doesn't show up for Belle's baby shower, but also the people she invited don't show up either, and she is left alone. And this is one of those moments where, again, you feel bad for her, and yet at the same time, you see how mean and messed up and manipulative and fake she is. And so they do a great job of where you can totally understand why people don't want to be around her, and she's doing it to herself herself, and yet you also feel bad in certain moments when she's left all alone with nobody. But then it's like you're doing it to yourself. It's your own fault. You're your own worst enemy, you know? But then to talk about Belle's mom in real life, so the writers of the book were in contact with her mom and her stepfather. She doesn't know her birth father, and they were both just such a piece of work. They told constant lies and exaggerations, and they were very greedy, so you can kind of see where Belle got it from. But in the book, we read of them. Natalie and Andrew are storytellers. They like to chat. The conversations switch abruptly from the intimate details of their lives to the mundane, to the seemingly unbelievable. They talk about being forced to move house after a home invasion and about a murder plot they claim was aimed at them. They continue to say they are private people, practically housebound, but then they open up to journalists, strangers whom they have never met, disclosing the most personal kind of information. During hours and hours of phone calls, Natalie and Andrew bounce off each other and they interrupt each other, regularly passing their old prepaid Nokia mobile back and forth to interject. And we also get a scene in the TV show when they have an interview with the mom and they pay for her hotel room the night before, and she just orders so much room service, and so the bill is crazy high. And this is true in the book too, because they were trying to fly the parents out to be interviewed. However, they missed the flight because they took forever getting to the taxi, which was waiting for them, which was sent to pick them up. And so then, because they missed the flight, they were like, the reporters or whoever, they booked a hotel for them so that they could get a flight the next day instead. And that night at the hotel, they charged crazy amounts of money. But again, I do feel for Belle in a sense, seeing that she was raised by a mom like this who maybe didn't give Belle the attention she needed, because it seems like maybe the mom herself was a narcissist. I did want to say though that Belle claimed her mom had MS, and this was legitimate because the mom did die from MS in 2017. And then also, Belle, clearly she has her own mental health issues, like Munchausen syndrome for one, as well as being a narcissist herself, and maybe she's even a psychopath. Like, I am in no way a medical professional, but psychopaths are willing to lie about anything to get what they want. They are very calculating, and women psychopaths want to be loved. So this definitely seems to fit the bill when it comes to Belle. However, the one thing that people could speculate on is how calculating she really was, because when this eventually went to court, the judge believed that Belle wasn't actually knowingly lying about this, but rather she was being taken advantage of, and she truly did believe that she had cancer, and she was just fooled by these ridiculous doctors who told her what she wanted to hear. And we do see one of these doctors in the TV show and how he's just a quack, and he has her hooked up to these electrodes. And in real life, she claims to have spoken to two different doctors, one of whom told her of the initial cancer diagnosis, and then the second telling her that the cancer had spread. However, the second guy was found, and he claims he never told her that. But this guy and Belle, like, they're both crazy though, so who knows what he did and didn't say to her. And he did truly bill her for thousands of dollars, which she paid. So you can wonder if she was some sort of hypochondriac who thought she really did have a medical issue. And so when some phony doctor, again, told her what she wanted to hear, she was quick to believe it. And so then he gives her this phony treatment and claims that she has now been cured. Or was she a cold, calculating psycho who knew that it was all a lie right from the start? But the book does talk about another cancer scammer, this guy named Brick. And he would do what I just talked about, where people would come to him having health issues and he would diagnose them with cancer, and then he would charge them thousands of dollars for this experimental treatment, and then they would be cured, quote unquote, when really they never had cancer to begin with. However, these people claiming he cured their cancer, they spread his name around, and so eventually real cancer patients did come to him to be treated, and they would end up dying. And so again, maybe this Dr. Phil guy who knew Belle, maybe he was like that and he was taking advantage of Belle being a gullible narcissist. But, you know, I'm inclined to believe that she knew it was a lie right from the start, and we see in the book and in the show that she has lied all throughout her life in an effort to get attention. But again, I do think she has a mental disorder, because how could a healthy person say and do such horrible things, right? And in that 60 Minutes interview, she seems physically unable to just come out with the truth, and she is sidestepping every question and beating around the bush constantly, all while making everything about her and how she is the victim. And so it's one of those moments again where you just want to shake her and just get her to own up to everything that she did. And as far as what happened after she was found out, so she did not go to her own trial in order to defend herself. But as said, the judge felt that she wasn't acting maliciously. And so again, she felt like she really was just duped, I guess. And part of her was delusional and thought she really had cancer. And so her punishment wasn't as bad as it could have been, but she ended up being fined over $400,000, but she never paid any of it. And she claimed she couldn't afford to pay it, despite the fact that she spent over $90,000 on clothing and makeup and travel from 2017 to 2019. So she was brought into court in 2019 because she hadn't paid. And yeah, her house ended up being raided on 2 occasions where they took some of her stuff to cover this fine. But then in 2021, they marked it as abandoned and stopped trying to collect from her. So again, they took some of her things, but she never made any actual payments towards this fine. And then Gibson has rarely been seen since her public downfall. In 2020, she was spotted on a social media video where she claimed she had been adopted into Ethiopia's Oromo community in Melbourne. And in the video, Gibson donned a headscarf and referred to herself as Zabantu. However, the leader of the tribal group came forward to state that Gibson was not, quote unquote, not a community member. So yeah, that is the last we've heard of Belle Gibson. The show says that she moves to California in the end, but I don't know if there's any truth to that. But I also wanted to mention the character of Heck from the TV show, who Belle hires for crisis management. And in the TV show, the two party into the night and they're flirting with each other. And then he sets up an interview for her, which ends poorly. And she then cusses him out when she sees her mom give an interview. And much of this was not in the book in the real life at all, because in real life, she does hire a crisis manager and he does set up an interview with her. However, this interview goes well. And in this interview, she admits that none of it was true. And even though she tells the interviewer this, when the interview is published, she is like surprised at the way people are responding. And she even says like, oh, like, why are they so caught up in the fact that cancer was a lie? Like, why aren't they paying attention to all of the people that I helped? And so again, she is just so incredibly delusional and narcissistic. But again, so in the TV show, this interview goes poorly and it ends with her yelling at the interviewer, but that was not the case in real life. But then also in real life, she wasn't like staying up late doing coke with this crisis management guy, and she never had a dramatic falling out with him the way we see in the TV show. At least as far as what I read in the book, that never happened. But one other thing I want to touch on before I end is the influence of the internet on this story in a variety of ways. So for one, Belle and Jess Ainscough became famous thanks to their online following, but they also talk again about the fact that no one was fact-checking Belle's story. So many people published articles, so many news outlets were sharing her story, and then again you have Apple, who was a huge supporter, and yet none of these news outlets, none of these companies did their due diligence to make sure this was even true. But thanks to the online news world where everybody wants to go viral and get clicks, companies no longer wait to verify their sources, because while they're waiting to make sure it's true, another company just publishes the article and then they get all the clicks. And so it's this race to be the first one to share the story. And so that's why they always say allegedly, because they don't have time to look to see if this is even true. And they don't care. They just want to get the story out there. And in the book, we read, examining this troubling trend of the news covering unverified online content, you need look no further than what happened with Belle Gibson. Her story ticked all the boxes. It was heartwarming. It made us feel good. But most of all, it was one we wanted to believe, the story of the human spirit defeating a dangerous and deadly disease. And Gibson, the woman at the center of it all, was a young mom, inspiring and photogenic. And the authors of the book, they also talk about how when they themselves were verifying the information for Monique and Kate, how it was such a long process to get access to the medical records and all of the different rules, and just, it was a very lengthy process. And so they say how, that right there shows why so many reporters don't bother doing this, is because it just takes too long. And again, in this internet day and age, they just want to hurry and get the story out there. But the book also delves into the fact how, thanks to the internet, this olden practice of public shaming has come back in style again. Because when the articles were published about Belle, of course, people are going to be upset and feel betrayed and be angry, but some of the comments, people were just beyond vicious and they took things way too far. And again, Belle deserved to be called out. She did not deserve the money and the fame and the adoration. She needed to be exposed. And it was horrible what she did. And yet again, people in the comments were just so beyond mean. And we see this in the show too, when a video of Milla getting upset at an organic restaurant goes viral and people in the comments are just saying horrible things about her online. And so thanks to the internet, so much more often these days, we are making judgments about people and we're so quick to cast stones. And also oftentimes people like to find someone who has done terrible things and they'll shame that person mercilessly in an effort to make themselves feel like they're such a better person. And yeah, it's just disgusting and gross. But to wrap things up now and move on to my final thoughts in book versus TV show. So again, this was a fascinating story while also being terrible and heartbreaking in many ways, as well as eye-opening. And again, I had never heard of Belle Gibson before, but I am very familiar with holistic wellness, clean eating, juicing lifestyle. And back in 2014, I knew multiple women who did juice cleanses for a month. And I myself, they didn't have cancer. They were just doing it for other health benefits. And I myself wanted to do it. However, it's actually really expensive and time consuming to do a juice cleanse. And so I never did it for longer than like a day. But that's another thing we could spend more time talking about, is how these holistic cures tend to be really expensive. And so only the rich people can even do these natural remedies, which it's also just, I mean, there's truth to it, right? Like, it is good to avoid certain food groups and it's good to eat clean and healthy and whatever, but that can also turn into its own disorder when you become obsessed with that. And then also they're selling you these products claiming that it's a superfood and it's going to fix this and that, when really it's not. And it's just a very lucrative hoax oftentimes. And yet again, I was totally bought into it when I was younger. And I also lived in Berkeley and Santa Monica, which is also kind of the hub for these wellness gurus in many ways. And then the show is called Apple Cider Vinegar. And in like 2016, 2017, I started every day drinking a shot of apple cider vinegar straight. It was disgusting, but I did it because at the time it was the hot new health trend and it claimed to cure so many different things and it helped you just all the way around. And so I bought into it and I was drinking it every single day. And so again, I didn't really talk about it, but the first chunk of the book does expose the wellness industry and how full of crap so much of it is. But yeah, I think the show did an excellent job. I loved their use of emojis taking over the screen when Belle posted something that got a lot of attention. I liked when the characters would talk directly to the camera. I liked the moments of humor. And I also thought the serious emotional moments were very powerful. And the show had me getting borderline teary multiple times. And then again, the book, I read it so fast. I just blew through this book because again, it was just so engrossing and so interesting and so fascinating. And again, that train wreck vibe of it as far as Belle's life is concerned. But again, I thought the TV show and the book also did a good job at showing the truth of Belle and her lies. And yet neither of them felt mean-spirited. And so I did appreciate that, because there are moments again where you feel bad for Belle, and it might not last long, but we do have those moments. And then just hearing about her parents, right? So kids who are raised, but then she's continuing the cycle because she is also a narcissist. So poor Oliver, right? But yeah, just these familial cycles we get stuck in. She had a bad childhood, and now her son, I don't know if we can say he had a bad childhood, but we know that he had a very narcissistic mom, right? And I don't want to turn this into people commenting down below hating on Belle Gibson, and I don't want to come across that way either. I want to have compassion for her while also acknowledging that what she did was absolutely terrible. But anyway, yeah, so both book and TV show, I thought did a fantastic job. And I keep going back and forth on which one wins, because for one, the book gives us so much more information and it delves into so many more topics than the TV show does. And yet I love that the TV show focuses so heavily on the characters. And I am someone who loves character-driven stories. And so the TV show focusing more on these individuals was more my style, while still being able to delve into some of these other topics going on in some ways, but not quite as fully as the book did. So initially I said that the book wins, but now I'm thinking maybe the TV show I would say wins because it's character heavy and just personal preference. I like that. But then the book was so good. And again, I learned so much. It was so engrossing. I read it so quick because I just couldn't put it down. So this is really tough. Maybe I'll say the book wins. But again, I don't know. I love them both. I'd recommend each of them. And yeah, that wraps it up on Apple Cider Vinegar, the story of Belle Gibson. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And also, if you are from Australia, I'm sure you have to have heard of Belle Gibson, right? Since that is where she was from, she and Jess Ainscough. So I would be curious to hear your take on it if you are someone who knew about this when it was happening, you know? So yeah, share your thoughts down below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.